Thanks everybody for tuning in to the last CIN talk of the year. And we ended with a project that's near and dear to my heart. We have Hans Addleman from Indiana University and EPOC going to go over a couple of our more interesting roadside assistance cases that we've had this year. Some of them good, some of them bad, all of them interesting. And hopefully everybody walks away with a little bit of an understanding of some of the projects and programs that we've helped. And I will throw it over to Hans to go through the details.
Thanks, Jason. Hi, everybody. So as Jason said, my name is Hans Addleman. I'm at Indiana University. And yeah, I was just going to kind of give a year in review of our roadside assistance program. It's part of the EPOC Center, the Engagement and Performance Operations Center. So just a quick overview of EPOC. We're NSF funded. Actually, yep, I skipped a slide. Sorry about that. So we're a joint NSF funded project between IU and ESNet. We were funded for 3 years. And we have a lot of partnerships built with regional infrastructure, science communities from all over. And we leverage a lot of our partnerships that we have in other grants at IU as well, and partnerships that ESNet has. So we have a lot of partners all over the world. Why is this important? We found through a lot of the work ESNet's done over the years that, as we move forward through the years, science is becoming more and more collaborative, right? We have people at IU talking to people in Japan and Taiwan and all sorts of different places, or, it's just spread all across the globe. And they're transferring larger and larger data sets between each other across, many diverse networks run by many different people, right? So in the diagram there, the map you can see, just one simple file transfer between IU to Thailand ran through, 7 different networks. And, what does a researcher do, if he's getting poor performance there, right? If he reaches out to his campus NOC, they might be able to help locally, but, how do they troubleshoot a transoceanic, international path for performance? And so that's kind of what we're here to try to help to do, especially in the roadside assistance area. So EPOC does have, like I said, 6 main focuses: the deep dives, the network analysis, the DME, training. If you'd like to learn more about those, you can go to epoc.global. Our website has all kinds of information on that, or shoot me or Jason an email. He's one of the co-PIs, so he would be more than happy to talk to you about any of these areas if you're interested. So roadside assistance has 2 main components. This is kind of the, you broke down, last week you had a file transfer that was going, 200, 300, 400 megabits per second. Boy, I hope it's going faster than that, but maybe it's not. And this week, you come in, you start transferring your file to your partner, and you're getting 1, 2, 3 megabits per second. We're here to help get that triaged and fixed if we can, and pull in the right people all along that file transfer to try to get that solved for you. Anyone can submit. You don't have to be a partner. You don't have to be an NSF funded project. Anyone internationally, we're more than welcome to take trouble tickets from. Excuse me. The consulting side of the house is more, if you need help building a science DMZ or suggestions on firewalls, DTNs, and how to do things, how to move data faster. Or if, say, you're getting a cryo-EM and you'd like to know about how much data that's going to produce and, what kind of network you might need to. Path with your architecture. Uh-oh. Can you guys still hear me?
Yeah, you cut out for a second there. I can hear you now.
Oh, weird. Great. Of course, my headset is reconnecting. We'll move forward. If I have to switch headsets, I can. And then, if you're going for a CC star proposal, we're happy to help there too, whether it be consulting or writing a letter of collaboration, helping you afterwards, baselining your network, finding science drivers. That's more deep dive side of the house, but we can start in the consulting realm and move on from there. Basically, if you have a question that relates to cyber infrastructure, we're here to help. So anyways, when I was writing the roadside assistance portion of the year 3 report for EPOC, I noticed that we had 97 total cases. And that's pretty crazy for a pretty small team. You know, we are IU and ESNet, but the people that are working on this, it's a pretty small team. So I thought that was pretty incredible that we covered 28 states, 12 different countries, and only 50% of those were submitted by an EPOC partner, so we are certainly reaching beyond our partners. And like I said before, anyone is free to put in a request for help. And so some of the top consultation projects during that year, data transfer performance, what we've been talking about, right? People were having trouble moving data. Architecture and design, we did a lot of help with people going for CC Star grants during that time. Data transfer node, persona node design and optimizations, we did quite a bit of that. We have some experts on the team in those areas. And then, of course, letters of collaborations and things like that, both before and after CC Star program proposals and awards. So one of the things we noticed during the data transfer performance, that routing was a big thing, whether it was asymmetric routes that we were finding, whether it was BGP choosing a commercial path over a commodity path, or excuse me, a commercial or commodity path over an R&E path, or even an R&E path chosen, but on a smaller pipe out or pipe in. And we also saw a number of places where BGP, their tiebreakers were close enough that, once a link did come back up, BGP was not normalizing to a best path after an outage. So, we saw this internationally, and we created, with the help of Ward Mitchell at RNet and Brenna Mead at IU and Jen Schupp, actually, my boss was the first co-chair, the routing working group, which is a joint group between the GNAG and APAN. We have monthly meetings. We just had one, this week, I believe, where a gentleman from Peering DB came by and gave a great talk. And, we continue to discuss ongoing cases, international routing cases, national routing cases. We look at best practices, how different R&E institutions can maybe make their routing better. We look at maybe BGP communities and things like that. But anyways, it's a really good group. We have about 150 members. Like I said, a meeting every month, a pretty active Slack channel and mailing list. So please, you don't have to join the Slack channel. I know some people are not a fan, but please join the group and join the discussion of how to make the R&E routing landscape better. So one of the other focuses we saw was a bunch of MTU issues. And, we've seen this for years, right? Whether it's a firewall blocking path MTU discovery or non-standard MTU changes made between devices. We even saw some commercial DDoS scrubbing services that would make some of our users change to a very non-standard MTU size for them to work. So we wrote a quick guide all about the MTUs there. You can see that, and you can just get it up. I've got global, of course, to try to explain why path MTU is very important for high-speed data transfers, and why people should not block ICMP, rather rate limit it perhaps versus blocking it outright. So anyways, that was kind of the overview. And I picked out 4 of our most or more interesting cases that we worked on over year 3 to talk about a little bit more. The first one, so you all heard of Arecibo. It had a full collapse on December 1st. And amazingly enough, EPOC had been engaged by the University of Central Florida and Arecibo a few months before this happened to talk about moving their 3 petabytes of data away from Arecibo. This data had never been backed up before. It was golden copies and about 50 years of astronomical data. That's a hard word. Anyways, so we'd engaged, we've been talking about this, how are we going to get you guys, get this data backed up? It turned out at the time, Arecibo had only an AT&T 1 gig commodity link. They had back in the day a 10 gig link, but the hurricanes had knocked that out. And then of course, December 1st came along, and you can see, unfortunately, there was a full collapse. It did not hit the data center, luckily enough, so we could still get the data out of there. And as you can see, this was a pretty large collaboration, spanned TAC, University of Puerto Rico, Globus, Engine 4, AMPATH, EPOC, the University of Central Florida, and CICOE. We were having weekly and sometimes twice weekly meetings trying to get this figured out. So the biggest problem, they came to us with 3 petabytes of data and a 1 gig pipe. So we started trying to figure out where to store this. UCF at the time did not have the storage infrastructure. Microsoft Azure, they had a deal where they could move it into there, but then actually pulling the data out to do anything with it got pretty costly. So actually, Jason reached out to Nathaniel Mendoza and Dan Pritz at TAC and said, hey, can you guys help? And they stood up almost immediately, like, a day later, and said, yes, we have tons of storage space. We are happy to host that. So then we figured that out, and then we figured out how are we going to, or had to figure out how we're going to move the data. And honestly, you can see the numbers there at 1 gigabit per second, even at, exactly 1 gigabit per second, you're looking at 305 days. And since they were only getting about 200 megabits per second, that was over 40 years it was going to take across that AT&T 1 gigabit link. And that was, that was not good, right? So we found that University of Puerto Rico and a co-location facility on the island called Engine 4 both had 10 gig connections to AMPATH. And Arecibo had actually already bought a couple network attached storage devices, about 175, 150 terabytes each. And so then we came up with kind of a crazy idea, but it ended up to work pretty well. Put a lot of miles on poor Julio's truck, but he was able to load, 150, 170 terabytes a time, drive one of the NASs over to Engine 4, another NAS over to UPR, and start uploading the TAC from there. So the NAS had kind of a problem. When we got it out of the box and started, doing our first file transfer, we found that while it had a 10 gig network interface, it was only getting about 200 megabits per second, maybe a little bit better. So that, that wasn't going to do anything better than what we'd had before with the AT&T link. So EPOC bought one for our lab, and an EPOC engineer pretty much went really deep into the system, figured out that he could fully tune it, and in the lab was able to achieve about 3 gigabits per second before he hit the limits of the subsystems in the NAS. So he wrote a really great guide for Arecibo. They tuned up their NAS, and then real world from the island to TAC, we were seeing about 1.5 gigabits per second. And with multiple NASs going at once, we were able to get 1 petabyte of the real critical data on spinning disk backed up to TAC earlier this year. There are still about 2 petabytes of data on tape, and that's going to take time because they actually have to move it from tape to spinning media and then to the NAS and off. Luckily, they're working on some NSF grants, I believe, right now, and other grants, and looking at funding to actually rebuild Arecibo. And in that, I know that the staff there are looking at really increasing their network capability. And of course, now, all this data is at TAC. And so they're working with Arecibo and UCF to create this great portal for astronomers to come and get that data and use it for science. So it's a big win here, so much so that we actually, the entire project, the team won the HPC Wire Readers Award of 2021. It was presented just at Supercomputing last month. So the second, this was from City College in New York all the way to Kyotech in Japan. For security reasons, they were using a GRE tunnel at the time. We're working with them right now to expand and make this better. But at the time, they were using a GRE tunnel. And unfortunately, they were only getting about 80 megabits per second, which for what they were doing, they thought was just fine. However, when going from New York to Japan, they were seeing just enough packet loss that it was just totally tanking the throughput. Interestingly enough, UDP was just fine in both directions, or was, I wouldn't say just fine, but, no packet loss and seeing about 90 megabits per second. So for this link, that was good. So during this, EPOC engineers used a number of third-party perf sonar nodes that are open to the public. And we really appreciate everyone that does install perf sonar nodes and allows testing to those nodes. EPOC without public perf sonar nodes would not be able to do a lot of the work we do today. So if you have a perf sonar node and it's public, thank you very much. If you don't, let's talk about maybe installing a perf sonar node on your network. Anyways, we started testing through to various points you can see in the map. And we weren't really seeing anything, on the wide area path. So we were seeing good performance all the way up to the near perf sonar node, which is just a couple racks away from the NiserNet switch that feeds CCNY in New York. So we started doing some internal troubleshooting with them, and they installed a perf sonar node actually in the researcher's lab, which was great. Sometimes we don't have this capability, but this researcher was really excited about this project. So he actually went and put perf sonar on, I don't even know what kind of box, but it was good enough, right? They had a 1 gig interface, so it was great, perfect. And we kept seeing that, as we moved into the campus, that issue has continued. And so we reached out to NiserNet, and they were able to install a iPerf perf sonar node right on the switch that feeds CCNY. So this perf sonar node was plugged directly into the switch that fed the research and education network into CCNY. And we found that there was still a problem there, right? So the testing NiserNet engineers were able to do showed some packet fragmentation, some MTU issues on the ingress, and giving this data to the engineers at CCNY allowed them to figure out which segment this problem was on, and they found an outdated network security device, and amazingly enough, they had it scheduled for replacement already. And with this information, they were actually able to expedite it. And thank goodness they got this thing in just a couple weeks, put that new device in place. Our perf sonar tests from the lab all the way to Japan looked really great. And hey, good throughput in both directions. So this was kind of an interesting one. There was quite a bit of testing along the entire path, and then our friends at NiserNet were really helpful in tracking that down. So this one is the National Radio Astronomy Observatory to the South African Radio Astronomy Observatory, excuse me, NRAO. So they were getting really bad performance, right? 4.8 megabits per second. And so some initial perf sonar testing did show a few issues. There was some asymmetric routing. There was some weird routing. Maybe, it wasn't the most direct paths. So we worked with some engineers along that way, got those changed. routing looks great, still no change in performance. So we started digging a little deeper, of course, using perf sonar again to some open perf sonar nodes that we were able to test to. And everything was looking good until we started getting, going directly into NRAO. We were seeing some retries, some loss of packets, some just, not what we would expect. So just real quick, I talked about path MTU discovery a minute ago. Path MTU discovery is really important, right, for high-speed data transfers. It allows the packets to get to jumbo frame, or if it needs to get smaller, it can, but larger is better in some cases. So it does require ICMP to function, and it's not always lost if it doesn't work, but boy, if it does work, it's so much nicer. So anyways, we started doing some further isolation at 1500 MTU. When we set the perf sonar test at 1500 MTU, well, look at that, man. That was pretty good performance. However, setting it hard set to 9,000 byte, and I believe with the do not fragment here, there's those retransmits and just terrible performance. So we started working with the network engineers at UVA and NRAO and looking at their configurations. And you can see their little network diagram they drew for us at the time. And we found that the UVA to Maria interface, and Maria is their regional network, had different MTU configurations. And because there was, it was two interfaces touching, there was no place for a path MTU discovery to do its thing there. So it kind of pretty much broke it at that point. UVA did make a change. So everything was matching the proper MTUs. And throughput went from 380 kilobits per second all the way up to 2.67 gigabits per second, which from South Africa to University of Virginia and NRAO, we thought was pretty good. This one was interesting. NCAR's multicast, so they were working on a new version of LDM and doing some testing across the country to different researchers working, or people working on the code for LDM. And they noticed that, they were really getting pretty terrible performance. And anything above 47 megabits per second was just seeing a terrible amount of packet loss, but only, as you can see, between certain sites. Some of the sites would do just fine and get just great performance. So, the minute they said multicast, all of us engineers said, oh goodness, it's a multicast issue. So we started looking at multicast configurations, group addressing, and things like that, just kind of going down that multicast troubleshooting route. And we weren't really finding anything. So some of the engineers at FRGP NCAR started doing some packet sniffing and looking at device counters along the path, getting pretty deep into it, but we weren't finding any issues. So this was our next step. And then, they found a network switch in the path for the ones that were broken, of course, that after about 255 UDP packets of multicast, it would just stop sending. And of course, it would stop sending and not tell anyone, not throw an error, not throw anything in the logs. It would just silently discard everything else. Luckily, that device, like we were getting pretty lucky, just like CCNY, they'd already had that device scheduled for replacement. And when the new device from a different vendor was installed and testing resumed normally, or testing resumed, everything was fine, no packet loss. It was some bug in the hardware or software of that old network switch. So fourth, the Ohio Supercomputing Center to ESNet. So they had put a newly installed perf sonar node in their network at OSC, and when heading to ESNet, we're just getting, like, as you can see, almost zero performance, right? In the reverse direction, it was perfect, right? So we started looking at trace routes and noticed here about hop 10, that, and I'm sorry, I truncated this a little bit so it could easily be shown in a slide deck. But anyways, we noticed here it went from Internet 2 to Hurricane Electric and then on to ESNet. And, Hurricane Electric is a great network, but it's a commercial network, it's a commodity network. And we had the inkling that if we kept that on the path, on the R&E path, it would probably perform better. So interestingly enough, the OSC engineers found a memory allocation issue on their router that was keeping the routing table from populating. So that router would not ever actually even see the R&E route. It would hit the commodity route because that's all that was in the table. So an upgrade of code fixed that right up. And then the ESNet engineer on the other side actually found an out-of-date routing configuration as well. And when these fixes, were put in place, the pathing was symmetric, the routing was symmetric, and we can see that through this trace route, just ORNet to Internet 2 to ESNet directly. And they also, of course, found some MTU issues. There's always MTU issues. Changed everything to jumbo frames, and you can see they got really great performance, and they added it to the mesh they were working with, and problem solved. So anyways, I just wanted to hit again that in year 3, only 50% of our cases had an EPOC partner involved. So please, if you have a problem, if you think you have a problem, if you think you have someone who might have a problem, send them our way. We can help. And as we find these common issues, we're starting to write white papers on what the issue is and how to easily fix it. So maybe we can, solve these even quicker moving forward. And you can check out all those materials at the materials page on our EPOC site, epoc.global/materials. Anyways, that's about it. Like I say, or like the Ghostbusters say, we are ready to believe you. No problem too small, no fee too big, I think is what they say. But we're free. So just please come talk to us. We're here to help you go faster. And one other thing, if this sounds interesting to you, we are hiring right now. So grab that link and put in an application if interested. And that's it. If you do have something, shoot us an email at epoc.iu.edu. If you want to just talk to me, there's my email address, and there's, again, our website.
All right. Well, thank you, Hans, for going through that. Yep. So go ahead and leave that one on there so that people can still see the email address. So open call, if anybody does have questions or wants to play Stump the Chump with Hans, certainly go ahead and ask them right now. Doug has the first one. Who can request help from EPOC? Does a request has to come from a director level person, or could it come from anybody?
We get them from everybody. I mean, we have had CIOs and CISOs reach out, but we've also had scientists in the lab, the CCNY. The PI for that project actually came to one of our, back in the day, I believe one of our OIN, the Operating Innovative Network, and he'd known about us, and he told his researcher in the lab to reach out to us. So we've had, this guy was a postdoc researcher, I believe, and we've had all the way up to CIO level or higher. So anyone can reach out, please.
Okay.
And you don't have to be a network engineer, right? We'll try to, yeah. Go ahead, Jason, sorry.
Okay. So I have a couple that I've jotted down while we wait for others to roll in here. How long do you typically keep an EPOC ticket open? Can you give an example of maybe what a standard length may be, or any particular ones that lasted a long time or a short time?
Well, so that's a little bit of a softball there. Thank you for that. I appreciate it. We will keep an EPOC engagement ticket open or a roadside assistance case open as long as the end user, the person who submitted the case, needs it to remain open, right? We will not close a ticket. We will not close a case until that person is satisfied and happy. We have had tickets that last a day. We've had tickets that last a week. We've had tickets that, like the Arecibo ticket, lasted almost a year, right? So we were with them, and we're still talking to Arecibo as they try to figure out what to do next about their network architecture and what it might look like.
Okay. For some of the more challenging ones, what's really the barrier to getting through to a solution? Is it typically a technical problem where new equipment is required or configuration needs to be put in place, or is it more of a policy level or sort of higher level decision that sort of gets bogged down into getting a solution?
I don't, it can be a little bit of both of those things, but a lot of times um, it's just finding the right person to talk to. And in a lot of ways, or getting the right person interested, as as I might say. Like once, most network engineers out there, especially, in our community, this stuff will interest them. And so as long as you can find the right person, you can usually get to an end solution. Sometimes you do have to replace hardware. Sometimes there is some policy stuff in the way. Um, but most of the time that can be worked out, or you just wait for the hardware to come in, right? I think most of the time though, it's finding the right people to talk to and getting them to believe that you're there with a problem. Just cold calling someone's knock is pretty hard. So like our partnerships and just being out in the community and advertising seems to really help, right? If I come and say, hey, this is Hans from Epic IU, hopefully they know I'm here to help. And yeah.
Of the sort of list of things that you listed off of the common problem areas, transfer performance and things of that nature, what are you seeing as the most common problem right now that we've had to repeatedly fix? Is it necessarily one thing? Is it a combination of things? What are the commonalities that we're still finding out there? And then the second part of that is, what can we do to stop making them the commonalities?
So I think the two biggest that we still see are asymmetric routing, and especially when it touches a commercial path versus an R&E path. And the way we can fix that or help that is have everybody join the routing working group. And I think that was our push, Epic and IU and ESNet, and our push towards trying to make BGP and routing better understood and have a place where people can come to with issues, or even just talking about best current operational practices and things like that. And then secondly, and I mean, I think every network engineer will tell you it's always the MTUs. And I think just that's one of the things we did was write that document about why MTUs are important and why path MTU discovery is important. Those though in performance land are usually the two biggest.
Okay. We've had two other questions come in here. You had mentioned Epic partnership earlier in the talk. How does one go about conveying that they would like to join Epic, or what are sort of the recommendations that we have for anybody who may be listening that wants to become a partner?
So I'm going to defer to the co-PI on that and ask you, Jason. That's a little bit above my pay grade.
Sure, I guess I'll call my own shot on that one. If there are any groups out there that are interested in becoming an Epic partner, it is absolutely free. Shoot a note to that first email address right there, and we'll have a quick conversation. But because we're NSF funded, we'll take anybody. Another question: how has the move to virtual over the past year and a half or 1,000 years, however you're measuring it, changed Epic engagements? How do you see future engagements going forward?
So luckily on the roadside assistance side of the house, and I think you can see this, right? Year 3 was 2020. So in the height of the pandemic, we had the most tickets we'd ever seen in a year, the most engagements. So honestly, I don't think it made it harder or easier on that side of the house. Now, on our other sides of the house where we do training and deep dives, where it's more better to be in person, that's certainly been, I wouldn't call it a pain point, but we're flexing and changing to better. And every time we do a virtual training or a virtual deep dive, we're flexing and learning and getting better as we go. But from the RA side of the house, I don't think it's been that much harder. I would have loved to have gone to Puerto Rico to help the Arecibo guys, but
Right. And then I have one more, and then I'll put the call out here. If anybody does have a question, please type it in. My last one is, we're starting to see people move into larger speeds as they become available capacities. So the networks are increasing, and of course they're being adopted. What do you think is going to be the next sort of round of challenges that we're going to have to deal with from a help perspective? Do you think they'll still mirror the current set that we have, or are there any new technology challenges you anticipate having to deal with in the coming year?
Wow, boy, so I bet you it will always be the MTUs. I bet you will always see asymmetric routing. I think our next biggest challenge will be maybe not in the coming year, or maybe in the coming year as they start testing, but as we get ready for things like the high luminosity LHC, that's just gonna, just saturate networks right and left, and people are gonna want to get the best performance out of those transfers. I think we'll be scrambling to help, because I'm not sure everybody is ready for that level of explosion coming out of the LHC, that level of data transfer needs.
Okay. And one last question that came in, for those that are moving into 100 gig campus networks and beyond, now that we're starting to see more regular 100 gig server level hardware, either for perf sonar testing or for data transfer, what is your advice for somebody who purchases one of those things, plugs it in, and then finds that they're not able to get 100 gig performance?
Well, so we're actually finalizing a document for that very thing right now. Brennan Mead, who's here, and I are writing that document right now. Anyways, right now you probably would not get 100 gig performance, just because, and this is campus by campus or regional by regional, but in a lot of places, right, there are only 100 gig backbones, right? So if your 100 gig backbone from your campus to your regional network, and then on from your regional network to the national network is only 100 gig, there's going to be all sorts of other traffic on that link. And you probably want to, TCP will play nicely usually, but yeah, you're not going to ever see, or I won't say ever, but in most cases, you're not going to get 100 gig per sonar test end to end. Maybe on ESNet you might, on a super clean, beautiful network. But overall, that's not going to happen, just because there's other background traffic there. And honestly, maybe you don't want to go with 100 gig perf sonar test, just so you're not kind of stressing all that other traffic, or having your other traffic compete with your testing. I would posit, and I'm happy to fight anyone over email or discuss this over email or Slack, that a 10 gig perf sonar node, you'll get all the testing you really need out of a 10 gig perf sonar node. And in my experience, the more interesting perf sonar tests are the ones that are many small packets at once, or over a small time, versus just large transfers.
Great. Well, that's all the questions that we had. I think I'll put one last call out if anybody does have anything else. But thank you, Hans, for going through that. We'll make sure that we get the slides posted and the video posted. And just like that, we have one last question from a friend of the show here, Scott Kohler. In your opinion, what is the best attraction at Disneyland and why? Or Disney World and why?
Disney
I'm sorry.
World. Oh man, that hurts. No, Pirates of the Caribbean always is.
And for those that don't know Hans is a big fan of Disney and just got off of a cruise not too long ago. So thank you for your opinion on the best ride. All right. Well, thanks everybody for joining for the last one of the year. We'll be sending out the list of talks that are going to start in early 2022 in January. Hope everybody has a good time off from your respective places of work, and we will talk to everybody soon. Thanks so much.